first, Andrew, can I just get you to state your name and your title as you'd like it to appear in the film?
Oh, that would be Andrew Breitbart, and internet publisher. Let me think. I didn't know that you were going to ask that. Publisher of Big Government, I would think would be perfect for this. Publisher of Big Government.
Okay, cool. So can you start off talking about the ways in which the mainstream media has characterized the Tea Party movement? And feel free to name names and networks.
Mm-hmm. Anderson Cooper turned me into a Tea Party attendee and speaker by initially characterizing these people as tea backers. I understood exactly what he was attempting to do. It was proof of a natural conspiracy that the media is a left of center operation that is becoming recalcitrant in the Obama era. At the exact same time that the media is imploding, the New York Times is in debt, CNN's ratings are in the tank. These people, the last thing that they have is they realize that they're likely going to lose their jobs. Their business models aren't working. The last thing they have, as they know they're going to get their pink slips, is their ideology. What long ago was hidden, their bias was hidden, now it's just out there in the open. And the same people that heralded the slogan, dissent is patriotic, for the 8 years of Bush, immediately started to make people who would dare dissent against Obama, because the mainstream media would not report on him or vet him as a candidate. When these people decided to take to the streets and behave and to to use the First Amendment the way that it was supposed to be, and become participants in participatory democracy, these people immediately attempted to marginalize these people, to attack them, to basically tell them, you don't want to be those people, because we're going to do to you as a mass what we did to Sarah Palin. You're not going to like that, are you? And I think that the average American who would ordinarily not go to a Tea Party was probably incentivized to go to it, knowing that they wanted to register a complaint against Anderson Cooper and those people that would mock them for caring about the expansion of government and putting their children's future on a credit card.
Well, and in that process, as the mainstream media was initially covering the Tea Party movement, a lot of names were thrown around. Can you talk about that a little bit? The Tea Party movement attendees were called, astroturfers were called. Can you sort of go into that a little bit? Some of the
Well,
yes,
the Democratic Party, which for the 8 years of George Bush, had no problem with communist groups organizing the anti-war movement. International Answer is a deplorable organization that 5 minutes of investigation into their alliances with Kim Jong-il and other tyrants around the world, they were at the forefront in a post 9/11 America in creating the marches on Washington against the war, and nobody had a problem with the nature of the alliances of this nefarious group, which brought in the likes of Jane Fonda and Jessica Lange to participate. Nobody made a guilt by association connection to International Answer. They allowed for them and their organizing capacity to create this movement. And the Nancy Pelosi's of the world were hyper defensive because they wanted to watch this anti-war movement grow and grow and grow. So they didn't care who helped to grow it, even if it were admitted communists and people that support tyrants. And so to watch Nancy Pelosi and to watch Harry Reid and the Democratic Party after 8 years of astroturfing and acorn-based bussing people out and paying them less than minimum wage to create fake protests, and SEIU sending busloads of people in order to create the perception that there's outrage against Republicans and conservative ideas, when these people are artificially, are artificially created astroturf protests. What you were getting was a mild form of projection, where you have Nancy Pelosi now attacking people immediately for the very things that they do. When this movement could not have been more natural in its outgrowth. It was so natural in its outgrowth that it didn't necessarily reflect the current nature of the Republican Party. Any analysis of the Tea Party movement is people who are against the expansion of government and overtaxation, and it's also a rejection of the current media. There's just raw anger at the mainstream media. These people seem to have contempt for the American people and don't want to report to them the truth. But there's also a contempt for the current state of the Republican Party, that it doesn't reflect the values, that its actions don't reflect the values that they claim to represent. And so for Nancy Pelosi to say that this is artificial, while it's mostly an anti-liberal, anti-leftist movement, it's also a corrective one that you see was represented in New York 23. You could not have had the Hoffman phenomenon, and if it wasn't for this schism within the Republican Party. So if this was astroturf, as Nancy Pelosi falsely suggests, this movement is a challenge to the Republican status quo.
So I'm going to let you know some of these questions may seem a little bit repetitive, and if you need to repeat some of the things you've already said, that's fine.
Yeah.
We're just going to try to get what we're looking for here. You mentioned astroturf. The mainstream media had suggested that the Tea Party movement is not organic, that it was organized by the top down, that it was funded by large corporations. Possibly using the words top down, if you can you sort of describe your experiences with the Tea Party movement and whether you think this is an accurate assessment by the mainstream media?
Well, I've spoken at about 5 Tea Party events, and each time I've been contacted by a citizen, not a corporation. My agreement to say yes to speaking at this event is because it felt so natural. I don't want to be used by the Republican Party. I don't want to be part of something that's an astroturf, fake. Nothing could be more natural than this. It's goofily natural. You see people with poodles dressed up with T-shirts with American flags at these things. You see people with handmade signs. You see people dressed as Paul Revere. At the first one that I went to, Ian Mitchell performed his songs from his days as the lead singer of the Bay City Rollers. He had just recently become an American citizen, and he had tears in his eyes talking about how much he loves this country. He married an American wife, and its spirit and its growth is because it is so natural, and it's a group of people who for I'd say 40 years have watched the left use organization and community organizing and street protesting as their primary way of communicating, and the idea that the mass of people who think the other way, that Costco, Walmart mass, would now say, we've had enough. We're going to go out there and we are actually going to start doing what we've seen the left do. When it wants to get something done, the left protests. I think the left is fearful now that they realize how effective it is, and that the right is starting to wake up to the realities of modern democracy. And I would say this: what if it were the corporations? The corporations want to be viable. The corporations want to be able to create jobs. The corporations want to be able to create product that's sellable in the United States of America. I have no problem with corporations and that represent people, just as community organizations and ACORN and SEIU represent people. So if it's okay for SEIU to bus people to protest, if it's okay for ACORN to bus people to protest, if it's okay for people to pay CalPERG $5.50 an hour to get people to sign people up to do things, why can't people who are part of who are pro-capitalism organize as well publicly? But
and yet the corporations weren't funding the Tea Party movement. Can I get you to use the words maybe top down when you're talking about astroturf for a second? Can you describe what astroturf means and what we're talking about? Talk about astroturf in relation to the Tea Parties.
All right.
In other words,
well, Nancy Pelosi, just like Anderson Cooper said teabag, and it was repeated by a bunch of people who wanted to marginalize these people, Nancy Pelosi immediately started to use the term astroturf. And that is, if grassroots is a natural protest, astroturf is its artificial corollary, and it's basically saying it's not real. That these are corporate structured, top down, or organizations. It's not the natural uprising of the people. It's an artificial top down construct, and.
And in your experience, is that true? I mean,
no, not at all. What corporation is behind it? If there's some conspiracy, I have not been paid by the Tea Party people. I've traveled, across the country to participate at Tea Parties. I go at my own expense. I have the time of my life because I'm seeing people who have traveled 50, 60 miles just to register their complaints, because this is a group of people who for the last generation have been told that their 9-to-5 job is now an 8-to-7 job, because they have to work harder and harder and harder in order to pay for their lifestyle, because the government wants to keep taking that middle class and taxing them harder and harder. And at a certain point, especially with the Obama administration and their desire to come in here and radically alter things and have an almost, Robin Hood on steroids attitude, these people are working way too hard, and at a certain point, there's an Atlas Shrugged moment that many people are starting to have, where they're recognizing, I can't work any harder. There aren't enough hours in the day, and people just, to say it's natural, it's almost an awakening for people. They can't not go to these Tea Party movements when they know that it's going to be on television and that their sign could maybe be seen by a camera. It's almost like the people on Gilligan's Island asking to be rescued, because the mainstream media will not cover their plight. The mainstream media accepts the premise of the Democratic Party and ACORN and SEIU and social justice and economic equality, so thinks that the Obama administration is finally going to give comeuppance to the great mass of people who don't produce for this society, and it's going to be done at the expense of those who actually do produce. And the people who produce have been working their asses off for the longest time, not getting credit for it, and being villainized by the press. And so you can't not look at the Tea Party movement as a rejection of the expansion of government, the media that would not just call them teabaggers and astroturfers, but would deny them the ability to do that which they said was the hallmark of democracy during the 8 years of Bush, and that is dissent. These people are dissenting about the very nature and structure of government. And to tell these people that they don't have the right to speak, and to tell them that their point of view is racist before you even have heard their grievance, shows that these people are fearful of red state America. They're fearful of the Tea Party movement because for the longest time they've been able to use the camera, their control of the media, their control of the networks like a series of funhouse mirrors in order to create the perception that this small elite group of people are representative of the masses. And if the Tea Party movement grows and grows and grows and people start thinking to themselves, wait, that's what I feel, that's what I've always felt, I've just always felt that I was a minority. And when people start seeing the Tea Party movements as a natural grassroots movement, people start walking out of their houses and saying, in Patty Chayefsky, Howard Beale form, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Will the mainstream media ever take notice?
The mainstream media is imploding as we know it. Everybody on an economic grounds, whether it be Craigslist having screwed over the classified ads section, getting your news on the internet for free. Why would you have your newspaper delivered? Fox News is beating CNN usually 3 to 4 to 1. The New York Times is absolutely going down. With the exposure of Dan Rather as having tried to throw an election at the last possible second, the American people know that the media is biased. The false sense that we have a neutral, objective press has ended in the internet age, in the age of competition. And so what we're finding now is the last stand of the mainstream media. They're not fighting right now for their economic viability. They know that their economic models don't work. They're fighting for their ideology. That's why the press got into the business in the first place, was in order to affect social change. And that social change is manifested in the presidency, in the idealistic presidency of Barack Obama. So for many people in the media right now, knowing that their jobs are not secure, all they can do is defend their value system, and that the value system of the media elite runs contrary to the value system of the Tea Party movement.
Okay, well here's an example. During the April 15th Tea Party in Chicago, Illinois, you're familiar with the Susan Roschin story. Can you talk about that for a minute? CNN did fire her. Can you describe what happened there?
The righteousness of the Tea Party movement occurred with the confrontation between Norm from Chicago and Susan Roschin at CNN, who is no longer with the network because the widespread ridicule that the internet was able to offer her for what she did to this guy. She went up to this guy who was holding his daughter at a tea party. She had pure contempt on her face for the group of peaceful demonstrators that were in her proximity, and asked him why he was there. And he offered up a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I promise you, if you go to an International Answer anti-war rally, these people are quoting revolutionaries like Che Guevara. And CNN is not there saying, wait a second, that's a known murderer. He's that revolutionary is a murderous. His heroism is an exploitation of the truth behind what this guy's about. But that's not what they did for the anti-war movement. They granted these people the moral high ground and said dissent is patriotic. They asked this guy an honest question. He quoted Abraham Lincoln, and she attacked him mercilessly. This showed perfectly what the relationship between red state Americans and the media. It's pure contempt. And
well, then she cut away from the entire broadcast and said that these opinions were not fit for family viewing.
Well, she also Susan Roschin also had talking points. She said, "Aren't you aware that Illinois is going to be getting X amount of billions from President Obama's stimulus package?" as if she doesn't even understand that his being there, in all likelihood, was a rejection of federal money coming into the state, that the state's not the best means of distribution of this type of money. She was armed as a CNN reporter not to get opinions, different sides of the story. She was armed to fight the president's battle. And that's what CNN is doing right now. That's what the New York Times is doing right now. And it is a battle between red state America, an America that believes in limited government, and an elite media that, if it's going to go out in flames, it is going to go out fighting for its utopian, idealistic, European socialist view on how government should work.
When you spoke at the Quincy Tea Party, at the end of your speech, you told the people in attendance, you are the fourth estate now. Do you want to talk about what you meant by that? And can you actually, well, I guess we can pull that, but try to incorporate that back into the question if you can, and into the answer.
Well, when I spoke to the Quincy Tea Party, that was on September 12th, and on September 10th, Big Government, my website, launched the first Acorn video. On September 11th, day 2 of the Acorn videos, these videos were presented 2 days before the Tea Party on purpose to show these people what I've called the Abu Ghraib of the Great Society. We have more than a half dozen exposed videos of these Acorn offices being incredibly corrupt, and we knew that the mainstream media would not cover this story because they are going to cover up for this type of thing because it represents their worldview. I think that the average Tea Party person saw that the mainstream media would not cover this story, and that this story was broken in the grassroots on an internet website that is working in conjunction with the Tea Parties. This is a grassroots website that has a virtual newsroom of Tea Party type people who are reporting the truth, and that truth affected change.
Aside from any particular story, what does it mean that the average person is a member of the Fourth Estate? What does that mean?
Well, the New York Times will no longer report the truth. It wants to report its truth. It wants to affect things in its way. It's abdicated its responsibility as the Fourth Estate. With technology, with blogs, the ability now, the software technology that grants people on the cheap to be their own publishers in order to get their truths out there, effectively, with the mainstream media not covering the stories, and bloggers who are researchers, lawyers, actors, scientists, people who have a great expertise, the ability to write and the ability to deliver it. These people now represent that the people of the United States in a participatory democracy now have the ability to be the Fourth Estate. And I think it's one of the great transitions in American history, that the elites are no longer in control of the national narrative.
I'm going to have you circle back to the beginning for a sec. Can you give me a list?
Like 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I know Adam wants us to, Luke wants to drop this in just because I know what the graphics are. Is there a way you can list, and I know you did this during your Tea Party speech, in as short a soundbite as you can, the way that the Tea Party movement was characterized by the media? They were called astroturf, they were called Nazis, whatever those terms were. Is there a way you can kind of...
Right. The Tea Party movement, from the word go, was a threat to the Obama administration, to the Democratic Party's attempt at the same time to say that the Republican Party is dead, the conservative movement is over, and that this is going to be permanent majorities for liberal Democrats in order to expand the state. When the Tea Party movement, aside from the Republican Party, which was too inept, too disorganized to organize their own, representatives to vote on behalf of conservative principles, the American people stood up. It was not a predictable event that occurred. And when it did, it caught Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, Barack Obama, David Axelrod, Anderson Cooper, Janine Garofalo, and Bill Maher by surprise. It scared the shit out of them. And these people started to call these people teabaggers. They tried to call them racist. And what they were trying to do is to tell the American people, the viewing public that they've controlled for the longest time, don't go out of your house. Don't join these people, because if you do, you're going to now be slurred as a teabagger, as a racist, as a homophobe. Any pejorative that they could possibly throw out from their limited lexicon, from their politically correct book of taunts to anyone that would dare dissent with them. They threw those out there because they wanted to tell these people, don't join them in their rebellion against the expansion of government. You have to accept this. And the American people saw through it. They did not allow for these people to speak first, to unload their grievances. They prejudged them, and people saw that. People are not stupid. And the Tea Party movement is as much a rejection of the expansion of government as it is a rejection of the elites in our society that would call anybody a teabagger or a racist for wanting to do what our founding fathers set up a government so that we could do this. And I mean, my goodness, the Tea Party is a rejection of overtaxation and taxation without representation. That's precisely the basis of this. It has no basis in racism. And these people at MSNBC even used a video or a photo of a black man holding a gun. They cut his head off so that you couldn't see it and said, do you think that the Tea Party movement is racist? That's crazy. They took a black guy with a gun to create the perception that it was a white guy with a gun, to create the perception that his proximity to Barack Obama at an event showed that the Tea Party movement and grassroots protests against Barack Obama were racist. It should be the mainstream media that should be on the defensive right now, because they've continually lied to the American people. They've continually attacked them. And I believe that the Tea Party movement will eventually become an overt anti-media movement.
We gotta go.
Okay.
Well, what time is it?
You really gotta go.
Okay.
All right, you gotta miss the tour.
Okay,
You already
yeah.
have the ticket for this one?
No, yeah, I do.
Okay, I was gonna say, 'cause it's whenever.
What I'm saying.
Okay. Okay.
All right, dude, thank you.